Trump threatens Apple with a 25% tariff if it doesn't build iPhones in America. We're dissecting an ultimatum from President Donald Trump to Apple, an ultimatum that I swear is a mix of delusion, shocking ignorance, and a cheap political stunt. He wants Apple to bring iPhone manufacturing back to the US or face a 25% tariff. Sounds very America first, right? But what's the reality? It's a disaster disguised with flowery words. Let's dive into what happened on CNN, where Julia Chatterley and her guests tried to explain this madness to the public. Julia Chatterley's tragic opening act.
Seconds away from opening bell right now, markets are facing another new reality today, reacting to President Trump's new tariff threats issued just this morning, as the president took to social media saying that he's now recommending a 50% tariff on all goods coming from the European Union as of June 1st, citing a lack of progress in trade talks there. And there's also more. He's also threatening Apple now with a 25% tariff if the company doesn't bring iPhone manufacturing back to the U.S. In my ear, we heard opening bell happening. That's happening right now. We're going to keep an eye as the markets open. Claire Duffy is here with me now.
Julia Chatterley opened the show with a worried tone, announcing another new reality for the markets. President Trump took to social media saying that he's now recommending a 50% tariff on all goods coming from the European Union. And there's also more. He's also threatening Apple now with a 25% tariff if the company doesn't bring iPhone manufacturing back to the US. Listen up. This isn't a new reality. This is a tired old nightmare rehashed by a man who apparently refuses to learn from his mistakes. Threatening a 50% tariff on the EU was already self-destructive, but directly targeting Apple? That's unbelievable stupidity. He's turning economic policy into a childish game, and we're the ones paying the price for his tariff addiction.
So futures were down, as it looks like, markets are starting to be in the red, as you're seeing there. And this is a concern about the trade war sort of restarting here. Investors had
There was like a brief moment, right?
Yeah, breathed a sigh of relief during this 90-day pause on most reciprocal tariffs. And now it appears that Trump is trying to exert some more pressure on the EU, threatening these 50% tariffs. This 90-day pause was supposed to end in July, but he is now suggesting that this 50% tariff on the EU go into effect June 1st. That is soon. So I think that's part of what we're seeing here. And then, of course, there is Apple. I think we've got Apple stock down almost 3%. Now, Apple had tried to move some of its production away from China because of the China tariffs. It had moved most of the U.S. iPhones that were getting shipped to the U.S. to India. But Trump is not happy about that. He wants iPhones made in the United States, and that is why he's threatening this 25% tariff on Apple. The problem is it's just not feasible.
Give the reality of it.
Apple will not be moving iPhone production to the U.S. Analysts estimate that if it did move iPhone production to the U.S., it would take 5 to 10 years. And that once that happened, iPhones could cost $3,500. That is 3 times the amount that they cost today. And consumers just wouldn't buy that product. Now, Apple has tried to sort of appease Trump in other ways. We've seen CEO Tim Cook meeting with Trump
more than once.
A number of times since the inauguration. The company has also announced this $500 billion investment in other types of U.S. facilities, production. But the thought of moving iPhone production to the U.S., some analysts have called it a fiction, a fairy tale. It's just not going to happen. And what we could see as a result of this 25% tariff, if it does go into effect, is consumer prices raised. There were already rumors that Apple was going to be raising prices for the new slate of iPhones in the fall. If this 25% tariff goes into effect, those prices could go up even further.
Claire Duffy, CNN's business reporter, wasted no time exposing the truth. She clearly stated, Apple stock down almost 3% now. And the reason? Because of Trump's delusional idea. Apple had tried to move some of its production away from China to India, a move that is completely logical and necessary from a business standpoint to mitigate risk. But Trump? He's not happy about that. He wants iPhones made in the United States, and that's why he's threatening this ridiculous 25% tariff. But here's the truly enraging part. Apple will not be moving iPhone production to the US. Analysts estimate that if it did move iPhone production to the US, it would take 5 to 10 years, and that once that happened, iPhones could cost $3,500. That is 3 times the amount that they cost today, and consumers just wouldn't buy that product. She even called it a fiction, a fairy tale. Fairy tale! This is the naked truth. Even a child knows that demanding a giant company like Apple dismantle its entire complex global supply chain and rebuild it from scratch in the US is utterly absurd. It would cost tens of billions of dollars, take decades, and the tragic outcome would be iPhone prices tripling. Who's going to buy a $3,500 iPhone? Only the most clueless fools or those living in Trump's fantasy world. This isn't making America great again. This is bankrupting American consumers.
Yeah, no, I mean, veteran tech analyst Dan Ives, who a lot of people lean on for just reality on this, I think he said estimated something like it would cost $30 billion for Apple to move over 3 years.
30% of its production.
Yeah, I mean, it is not happening. It's just not happening. So what the play is here, and the pressure that Donald Trump is trying to exert on Tim Cook and Apple right now, that's the TBD, because you know that Trump has to know this reality.
And I think the problem here is it just creates more uncertainty, and businesses can't operate under uncertainty.
Absolutely not.
Julia Chatterley continued to emphasize by quoting veteran tech analyst Dan Ives. He said, estimating something like it would cost $30 billion for Apple to move over 3 years. It is not happening. It's just not happening. She concluded, I think the problem here is it just creates more uncertainty, and businesses can't operate under uncertainty. Absolutely not. $30 billion. And that's just the initial estimate. This isn't a game Trump can play with taxpayers' money and corporate profits. His so-called pressure isn't strategy, it's destructive behavior. It creates unacceptable instability in the market, killing confidence and stifling growth. Businesses need stability, not tsunamis from an erratic president.
I mean, behind closed doors, Wolf, yes, but definitely not in public. And I know myself and other reporters have publicly tried to press White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on this. Now, look, this post that the president put up about Apple and its CEO, Tim Cook. He essentially said that he has long warned Cook, someone that the president speaks with frequently. I would note that he was actually here at the White House just a few days ago. Tim Cook met with Donald Trump on Tuesday here. He said that he's long warned him that he would put this 25% tariff on iPhones if they did not begin moving the manufacturing of those iPhones to the United States. Now, one thing to note here is that most of the manufacturing for iPhones happens in China. They had begun to move some of the manufacturing to India, noting that it's has more favorable relations with Donald Trump. But this is, of course, something, as you mentioned, that is going to massively increase the price of iPhones. iPhones in the U.S. are currently $1,000. Experts say that if this goes to plan as Trump wants it, it could begin costing consumers $3,500 for iPhones. So something, of course, that I don't think a lot of consumers or people in this country would want, but this is something that the president has long been fixated on and has talked about since the beginning of his tariff war.
Elena, a White House reporter, revealed the infuriating truth. Do White House officials acknowledge, at least privately, that this is going to increase the cost of iPhones for American consumers? And the answer is, well, yes, but definitely not in public. This is pure deception. They know perfectly well that this policy will make Americans dig deeper into their pockets, but they don't dare publicly admit it. They'd rather hide the truth to protect a delusional political image than face the painful reality they themselves created. A $3,500 iPhone? That's not a gift. That's a punch to the face of America's working and middle class.
Well, Wolf, this would be a major escalation in the trade war, and it is not sitting well with investors. The moment that this true social threat came out, we saw U.S. stock futures fall, and you see markets are all solidly in the red, with the Dow down by 300 points, about 0.75%, but a 1% decline for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ as well. And this reaction, I think, makes a lot of sense because investors had been hoping for de-escalation in the trade war. This would be a move in the wrong direction, and it does add a lot of uncertainty because the European Union is one of America's biggest trading partners. The U.S. imported more than $600 billion in goods from the EU last year alone, including major items such as pharmaceuticals, cars, car parts, aircraft, machinery, and alcoholic beverages as well. Massive tariffs would disrupt the flow of trade and sharply increase prices here in the United States. I talked to Mary Lovely. She's a trade expert over at the Peterson Institute, and she told me this is just going to backfire. She said the EU considers itself to be a major global body. It does not deserve to be treated like a small plumbing contractor. And Wolf, we did reach out to the EU for comment. We have not heard back, but you got to believe if these tariffs do go into effect, and that is a big if, but if they do, you've got to believe the EU would seriously consider retaliating, and that retaliation is where U.S. jobs could be threatened.
They certainly could.
When Wolf Blitzer asked about the threat to the EU, the economic reporter warned, this would be a major escalation in the trade war, and it is not sitting well with investors. The moment that this true social threat came out, we saw US stock futures fall. Let no one misunderstand, this isn't just about Apple. This is part of Trump's tariff everything strategy, a strategy that has proven to be a failure time and time again. The EU is a huge trading partner, and threatening them with tariffs will only lead to retaliation. Mary Lovely, a trade expert, stated directly, this is just going to backfire. And when the EU retaliates, who will suffer? It's American companies and workers. This is a dangerous game Trump is playing with the country's economic future. From what we've heard, it's crystal clear that President Donald Trump's ultimatum to Apple is not just a bad policy. It's an insult to the intelligence of the American people, and a prime example of shocking ignorance about how the real world operates. The made in America delusion. You can't just wish it into existence. The iPhone supply chain is a complex global network built over decades. Replicating it in the US is not only incredibly expensive, but also impractical. Trump is demanding Apple do the impossible, and the consequence will only be chaos and failure. Hitting Americans' pockets. A $3,500 iPhone isn't making America great again, it's making American consumers poorer. Who can bear that burden? No one. This policy doesn't protect consumers, it's attacking them directly, creating chaos, not stability. These constant tariff threats are like continuous electric shocks to the market. Businesses cannot operate in such an unstable environment. Trump claims to want to help businesses, but in reality, he's kicking out their very foundations. Dangerously politicizing economics. This isn't about economics, this is about political grandstanding and the personal obsession of a man who wants to control everything. He's willing to sacrifice the nation's long-term economic interests just to score short-term political points and satisfy his ego. In short, this policy from President Donald Trump is a disgrace. It demonstrates a profound lack of economic understanding, a disregard for reality, and a dangerous recklessness with the country's future. We need leaders with vision and knowledge, not those who just scream empty slogans and cause irreparable damage. It's time we woke up and stopped letting these antics destroy us further. If this issue matters to you, don't stay silent. Drop a comment below and tell us, do you think Trump's tariff threat is smart policy or reckless politics? And don't forget to subscribe to Miles Vexler Reaction for more sharp, unfiltered analysis. Your voice matters.